Welcome to Rethinking Education. Education's critical friend.
And we're live on Facebook once again. Welcome back to any regular viewers. Welcome to everybody on the screen, and especially to our three special guests today, Sephora, Yumna, and Zoya, who are associated with Pupil Power. So thank you very much. Welcome to the Rethinking Education Campfire Conversations, which are conversations with people who want to rethink and reform and reshape, rebuild, use whatever metaphor you like, education, or maybe more specifically schooling, so that we can see whether we might be able to bring about a more harmonious, less hair-raising state of world affairs, because, you know, it's quite fruity out there, as you may have noticed if you've ever seen the news. So let's start by whizzing around the screen. We'll start with you, Sephora, Yumna, and Zoya. If you could just say your name and where in the world you are and why it is that you wanted to join this conversation. So let's go Sephora first.
Okay, hey guys, my name is Sephora, or Sephora Zola. I'm 18 years old, and the reason why I wanted to join this conversation was because I have a passion for just speaking on issues that affect me, or issues in which I can interact with other people and just get to hear other opinions. I think what you guys are really doing here is really, really amazing. So I'm really excited to get involved and just kind of just have a conversation with you guys. So yeah, I'm just intrigued with all types of kind of conversations, and I run a motivational page called Bigger Than Yourself, separately from Pupil Power, which I enjoy doing. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
What's Bigger Than Yourself about?
Bigger Than Yourself is literally a motivational page that me and my friend run on Instagram, where we just like post videos of ourselves, and the videos kind of relate to just global issues, social issues such as like education. So we want to do something joint with Pupil Power eventually. But yeah, it's based on like education. We touch on racism. We touch on just like issues that kind of impact us, and issues that we feel as though should have more awareness, and there's more awareness about that. Yeah.
Right, great. Okay, thank you. I will put a link to that in the notes beneath the video. Thank you. Zoya.
So I'm Zoya, and I am in West London. Yeah. So the same thing for me. I'm like really active in the community. I'm a massive fan of like public speaking and of volunteering. So I do that quite often. And I came across this through Pupil Power as well. And I was interested because, you know, why not?
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect answer. Why not, indeed. And as people may have noticed, Zoya's video isn't working, but she can join us by audio, which is wonderful. And Yumna.
Hi everyone, I'm Yumna. I'm 16 years old. I'm from Birmingham. I've just finished my GCSEs, so finished year 11, and I'm heavily involved in a lot of youth activism, being part of like local and national youth boards. And I wanted to join this call today because I'm extremely passionate about like transforming our education system. I recently did a TEDx talk on reimagining education, so that we can create a bigger impact in the world. And I was thinking about the ways that we can translate, you know, the conversations that we've been having into reality. How can we get an inclusive, democratic education system that actually works for young people and for educators as well? And I'm really excited to be on this call today.
Amazing. You did a TEDx talk.
Yes, it's on YouTube.
Fantastic. Okay, well, if you're happy to, we'll link to that in the notes beneath as well. Thank you very much. And just out of interest, have you finished school? You're not going in now that your assessments are done?
No, I'm still going back to school for like 2 more weeks, I think. But yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Because did you see there was like a news story this week where Amanda Spielman, who's the head of Ofsted, said that it's outrageous that all these year 11s who have finished all their assessments are not going to school anymore, which they wouldn't be in a normal year. The year 11s would have left by May half term, but she seems to think that they should be going right up until the end of July, as far as I can tell. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so my school is part of an academy trust. It's one of the largest academy trusts. but they've decided that we're going back to school until the 25th of June, I think it is. And we're doing like different activities, a lot of physical education, a lot of different things that we wouldn't have done. So they're bringing in like business leaders, workshop sessions, sort of interesting things that we wouldn't do in the mainstream like education curriculum. And so I don't mind going back to school, but I just feel like think there should have been a more focus on well-being and the health of young people throughout the whole of the pandemic, rather than just now when we're leaving school.
Yeah.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? So they do all this cool stuff like after the assessments, it's like what education should really be like, maybe, but only is like a little jolly at the end. But still, it sounds like it's a great thing. I'm starting to come around to Amanda Spielman's position on this. If schools are doing stuff like that with their year 11s, rather than just, let's do some more geography, kids, like, but we finished the assessments, then nothing against geography. I could have inserted any subject there. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let's now hear a quick introduction from each of our regular guests. Natalie.
Hi, yeah, I'm Natalie. I was a teacher for over 20 years, between 88 and 2011. I left to do something completely different and did a master's in sustainable development, which ironically brought me back into education from a social sustainability perspective. And all the frustrations that I felt whilst I was teaching kind of came out through this. And as a result of the research I did for that master's, it led me into a doctorate, which I'm now currently doing. I'm based in Stroud and universities in Bristol, and I'm passionate about lots of things, particularly United Nations Convention for the Rights of the Child and Article 12, which involves empowering young people, that they should be included in any decision-making processes that impact on them. Yeah, I'll stop there because otherwise I'll go on.
Yeah, thank you. So this is not a radical idea. This is actually written into some sort of legal framework, isn't it? The UN HRC. Good idea to talk to young people from time to time, or maybe even all the time. Indeed, Kath.
Hi, great to be here, an honour as ever. I'm Kath. I am in the process of reimagining education still, I have been doing it for about 20 years, but I'm founder at a kind of social enterprise sort of learning community ecosystem, I guess, down in Cornwall, where we're reimagining education as much more of a kind of connected whole community, blowing open the boxes of work, family life and schooling, and building something really pretty cool, I hope, shortly. So it's great to be here, and all of these ideas just are so vital, and yeah, it's exciting.
Great, thank you. And Kate.
I'm Kate McAllister. I've been a teacher for about 20 years. Been working with James for 10, rethinking education together. And last year, I decided I kind of needed to put my money where my mouth was. So I've opened an alternative to school, and it's here in the DR because that's where I was trapped during the pandemic. And it turns out it's a lovely place to open an alternative to school. And it's amazing working with the young people, building it with them, not for them. So consulting them on every step of the journey, what should be on the curriculum, what should be on the lunch menu, how should we structure our day, pretty much every part of what affects them, they are included in the decision-making process for. So yeah, it's really interesting and something that's working out incredibly well. There is so much more responsible than I think lots of people give youngsters credit for. So I'm very glad to have 3 new youngsters to speak to today. And Yumna, if you've got any interest in being a teacher in a few years, come over to DR. I think that you'd fit perfectly in at the Hive.
Sorry,
Don't worry, I'll come over.
where did you say you were specifically?
Dominican Republic.
Wow, that is so cool.
Yeah. So Kate, do you want to just say a little bit about how you came to be there and what led you to this point?
So I've been the same as everybody else here, reimagining education for a really, really, really long time, and had a few goes at building models for education for groups of people who are kind of stuck outside of the mainstream. So did some work with refugees and migrants who just arrived in host countries, working with lots of different communities who are kind of stuck next to each other but not working well, not gelling. And when I put all of those things together with the education model that James and I built, I thought, well, this could work. We could do a whole education model like this. So I set off around the world to meet other people who were doing alternative education so that I could talk to them and find out who they were and who the people were that went to these schools. And I found out all about the world schooling movement, all of these people, families who travel together and they work and live and school and educate all together in the way that Kath was describing, but they also travel. And my idea was to just research it, to interview them, to learn. And then the pandemic came and we needed a model. We needed something to do to keep our children entertained and educated. And we wanted to do something. So the Hive slowly grew from 5 families and 11 children, and now we have families flying in from all over the world. We've got 40 children, and it's growing. So it's growing into a whole learning community. Kind of exciting. Hard work, but very exciting.
Yeah, it's very cool. We did a recent episode of the podcast where I interviewed Kate and Kath and 2 other women who set up alternative schools recently, 3 of which were set up during the pandemic, which is even more remarkable. Yeah, there's some fascinating stuff there. So let's get started. We started these conversations. This is the 4th episode. And the first couple of episodes, we had like 1 young person included in the conversation. And then in the last one, there was like nearly all young people. We had 3 from the UK and 6 young people from the Dominican Republic.
Wow.
And it was just such a powerful episode. Like so many people sort of commented on it, and I found it very powerful. And I was just like, okay, we can't go back to just having like 1 young person on each call. We really need to bring more and more young people in, and to just to hear as many different stories as we possibly can. So that we can find out more, because at the moment, like, we don't know enough about what's going on really, and what young people's lived experience of school is, to be able to have like a really informed discussion about what we should do more of or less of. We haven't got the picture yet. There's lots of teachers talking to other teachers about stuff, and there's not so much including young people in the conversation. So I'd be really interested to, maybe a good starting point would be to just talk about like why it is that you became involved in Pupil Power, and what you've been up to since then. So I don't mind who goes first.
Yeah, I don't mind, Yumna, if you want to go first.
Yeah, you can go first.
Oh, okay then. Wow. Where did it all start? Why did I join Pupil Power? Okay, so I have lived in East London my whole life, which is specifically Newham, one of like the most deprived boroughs in London. And like my experience within education, I'm going to try and keep it brief because I can waffle forever. My experience within education has always been quite good in terms of kind of like academically. Everything's been, fine. But in terms of opportunities and kind of what's been lacking like within certain schools, I was kind of oblivious to that throughout secondary until year 11, until it got to a point where we had kind of finished our GCSEs and we were kind of out of education at that point. By the way, guys, I'm currently in A-level, finished my A-levels. I'm in year 13, or I was in year 13, just for some background. I finally am out of education. So yeah, I'm happy about that. But back to kind of year 11 GCSEs, I was really close to one of my best friends is Aliyah, founder of Pupil Power. And we've always kind of been passionate, like from year 8, just, this is so random, but I think I just have to let you guys know anyways, but from year 8, at such a young age, me and Aaliyah had always been having like passionate intellectual conversations about injustices, and kind of passionate, like interesting conversations just around the world and within like education as a whole. So we'd always have conversations on this, and then it got to a point where, fast forward to year 11, we finished our GCSEs, and Aaliyah had kind of mentioned that she had attended was it the House of Parliament, Westminster, I think, or was it House of Parliament, one of those. She attended this kind of this forum at Westminster, I think, and they kind of touched on issues that happen within the education system, such as like low funding and government cuts. And I always knew that there was a problem. We always knew that, you know, ceilings were kind of falling in schools, or there weren't enough textbooks within our community, or there were always issues like that, but we never kind of had a name for it. So when Aaliyah went to that meeting, it kind of sparked something. It kind of provided us with the terminology that, okay, this is what's happened. There has been government funding cuts within kind of Newham specifically, or like deprived boroughs. And when we both kind of, when she found that out and she told me, it sparked something within us, and we had like a very like passionate conversation. Obviously, she went and founded Pupil Power. I then kind of joined and got involved so much as I could, and like also purely based off like finding out about kind of the injustices, I also created my motivational page. And from that, I've kind of just been heavily involved in activism, kind of unsettled by kind of the injustices. Like, I don't feel comfortable living kind of or going to school, or going to being in education and not being able to do anything about it. So yeah, without rambling on, that is kind of where it all started, and how it kind of sparked.
Great, thank you. And how about you? Should we go to Zoya next?
I have a very similar background to Sephora, to be fair. The thing is that I am not from the UK. I'm from Pakistan, and I was like raised there for 10 years. And when I came to the UK, I was like introduced to another whole culture. And I think it was when I was trying to adapt myself that I was questioning a lot of the scenarios, would you say? I would say, because I had noticed the pressures people were being given from a very young age, from primary. So then I decided, then I was like questioning everything, that is this right? And then when I go into year 7, with the help of some supportive teachers, I was able to get myself involved into so many things. But then I realized that the same community, there were those who were not getting the support from the teachers. So I noticed this unfair balance within the students, and that's what started my motivation to kind of make a change and to influence the thinking of others in a positive light, because right now people are being unjustly treated just based on their appearance or based on their grades, and I think that's so ridiculous.
Yeah, thank you. I think we'll probably come back to that later on, because that's such an important point. And Yumna, how about you?
Yeah, so I've been involved with a lot of activist work since I was young. Since I was like 12, 13, I was writing articles about injustices in the education system, and what I thought, and it all boiled down to the fact that there are so many gaps within our traditional mainstream education system that it can't simply be reformed again. It has to be thought of in a more imaginative and more radical way. And so teachers and like students need to be working together to achieve this. And there's like, the pandemic has highlighted so many flaws within the education system already. Like, for example, teachers' unions not being listened to, students are not being listened to. I feel like in the pandemic, we asked them to have an elected youth minister with the government so many times, and they kept sidelining young people. And I was on a consultation a few months back with the Prime Minister's representatives about, young people education and how they cope with COVID. And when I, was, expressing my thoughts on how I feel like young people have been ignored and, being basically treated as economic commodities, basically. And it's all sort of like a business transaction. There's no consultation with young people. It's all about, okay, we're talking about young people without actually talking to them, and even when we're trying to talk to them, we're not actually listening to what they're saying. We're listening to respond and not listening to actually, create a change with them. And so I feel like the current education system just prioritizes, standardization, conforming over creativity and imagination. And it's not just dangerous for students, it's also dangerous for educators as well, or teachers who want to, teach outside the curriculum, but they feel like they're bounded. And they're also measured basically on their ability to meet the targets that are set by the government, or meet the targets that are set by external providers. And so I feel like students and teachers themselves are forced down this pathway. And then we only perceive ourselves based on what society's expectations of what schooling and what education should be, where arts has been, pushed to a side. There's a rapid decline in opportunities for young people, a rapid decline in the effective collaboration that can take place, and young people are not being developed as whole, individual, confident beings who can actually make a difference to the world. And so that was basically my main motivation for any activist work that I'm doing, or anything that I'm public speaking on education system. And that's essentially why I joined Pupil Power.
Wow. Yeah, I think we need a little round of applause there. That was a barnstorming opening statement. My goodness. Do you want to come in there, Kate?
No, it's just like, awesome. I can retire now. I can just quit. Yumna can take over. She's got it. She's more articulate than I will ever be. And I can just take a rest on a beach now, because the world's in good hands. That's exactly how I feel. And I didn't have my voice when I was 16. I didn't know how to say that out loud. I've only found it in maybe the last 4 or 5 years, really truly found my voice and would be brave enough to say everything that you just said out loud. So by the time you're as old as me, my goodness.
That's exactly the same for me, Kate. In fact, I was talking to Yumna before, and I was saying it, I feel like, and I've mentioned this in this group, I just feel like you've been in a box, soundproof box, that you're screaming away and no one can hear you because no one wants to hear you or can hear you. And now, certainly for me, the pandemic just seems to have completely transformed that. And finally, there's other people screaming about the same thing. So it's, finding your voice. It's great that all of you young people, Yumna, Sephora and Zoya, you've got your voice now at your age. That is magical.
Yeah, incredible. And the point that you made there about, I think Aliyah made a similar point last week about reform, like the language of reform is not strong enough, because reform just sounds like sort of like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic sort of thing. It's like tinkering at the edges, but actually you're talking about quite radical fundamental change where young people, and like you were talking about this like consultation exercise where we're like, oh, we'll listen to young people, we'll set up like a youth council, but we just basically ignore them or let them organize the bake sale. And that not really, it's not like young people are at the heart, and it's not like young people need to be at the heart of decision making. Lottie Cook made a really interesting point in a previous episode where she talked about how sometimes older generations speak to younger generations and they're like, we've messed this whole thing up, sorry about that, it's over to you, sort of thing. And she used this word exploitation, and it really made me think, so that is really exploitative. Like, we're gonna like Kate say, we're gonna kick back and like, it's all in safe hands. Young people need to be in the conversation, but we're all in this together, to use that phrase so beloved of the Tories a few years ago. We are all in this together, and we need to work in a collaborative way. And that's something that I'd really quite like to get my head around, is like, what would that look like? How can we as adults, as educators in the mainstream, in the alternative sector, parents as well, parents is another hugely overlooked group of people, and young people, how can we work together? What would that actually look like to bring about change? That's a big question.
Yeah, I think before I touched on that question, what Yumna said about the pressure, I think by the pressure, I mean in terms of like education as a whole, she spoke about us being kind of economic commodities and how we're kind of used system where everyone's trying to reach a certain target and meet a certain goal. And I feel like I definitely agree with that point. First and foremost, I feel like everyone feels that pressure. It's not just students that feel that, or students that feel voiceless. I feel like sometimes teachers can be in that position because sometimes it's like students expect them to change this and change that, but sometimes it's not even the teachers controlling it, it's the government or the academies or the people kind of higher up. And I wanted to mention that because I feel like we need to kind of almost kind of reach out and speak out to the people at the top to kind of break it down from there, because a lot of teachers and a lot of students do feel helpless and it's like, oh, it's out of their control. But I think that's why young people need to kind of start connecting with the people that are higher up and the people that have kind of are in higher positions to kind of communicate and find a way to bridge that gap between young people and put people in positions of power to kind of make certain changes. And also I did want to add, in terms of kind of making a change and improving kind of young people's experiences within education, I think we need to start to shine a light on how amazing opportunities can be. And by opportunities, I mean opportunities within the arts and opportunities within kind of different aspects of life. Because for me personally, throughout school, I think the best part of my education as a whole has been the extracurricular activities. I know that's kind of random because like, we go to school to learn, but the best part of my education was being involved in performing arts, in musicals, in sports, and all that type of stuff. I feel like those really had a big impact on who I've become today. It's allowed me to kind of speak out the way I do right now. And all of these factors and qualities are so important to me. But yeah, I think in order to change that, it means kind of bridging that gap between the people in power and young people overall.
Yeah, thank you. Have you got any thoughts on what we've been talking about so far, Zoya?
Yeah, because these young people are so good at everything. So yeah, I literally just agree with everything, and Sephora especially, and also you just take the words out of my mouth at this point. I'm jealous.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of places that we could take this conversation, but I'd quite like to just rather than sort of steering it by asking questions, I'm quite like up for the idea of you just sort of taking it where you want to go. Is there anything that you would like to talk about what do you think is like top of the agenda of things that you would like to see happen, either to see more of or less of?
Yeah, I wanted to talk about like how I feel like in the education system, there's so many different, aspects. There's, parents, there's educators, there's young people, but the change can't happen like as a top-down approach or just as a bottom-up approach. It has to go both ways. Young people need to be talking to older generations, but older generations need to be talking to young people and vice versa. And people at the top of like the power chain, government officials, local government, national government. It needs to be a multi-directional and interpersonal approach. It needs to happen at all different levels simultaneously, rather than just young people trying to talk to, government officials and trying to lobby for education change. But it's not going to happen if we don't have the views of the parents or, views of educators. It needs to all happen at the same time. And I also wanted to bring up the fact that I feel like sometimes it can be just like as a tick box exercise where, okay, you've talked to a young person, you've ticked it off the list. And there's nothing, there's no follow-up, there's nothing, there's no process after that. I felt like that when I was I mentioned it before about the Black Lives Matter, when I, sent an email to I think it was the CEO of the Education Trust, like loads of the people at the top of like the Academy Trust that I'm a student at, and they basically said, we hear your concerns, we take it, but like right now there's not that much that we can do. And I felt like it was more of, okay, we've read it and we don't really care about it. And every time I kept asking for follow-up, it was like, okay, yeah, we're trying to do that. Check out our diversity policy that we have. But it's like, no, diversity is not enough. There needs to be inclusivity, like diversification in the education system is not enough. We need to be decolonizing the education system. And it actually depends on the school that you're from. I feel like there's some schools that there's no diversity in the schooling system. So obviously they need to be looking at ways to introduce that into the curriculum. And other schools have a lot of diversity, but actually the senior levels in the schools are, they don't take into account what the teachers have been saying and what the students have been saying. So I feel like the schooling system doesn't actually accommodate for students or staff actually. their own like shifting and complex identities. It starts from you. You know, if you've not done the social, if you've not, you know, educated yourself about issues, and if you're not actively trying to implement them in your own life, then you can't expect the people around you to be doing the same thing. So it starts with you, and then impacting the people closest to you, and then talking to other people in the same sphere that you are, but also trying to ensure that you're educating yourself constantly and being conscious about the language that you use, and talking to other people about their own experiences, seeing how it relates to yours, but how it's also different.
And that was amazing. Literally everything you said, I completely agree with. I think also just what you mentioned about taking it upon yourself to learn certain terminologies and just being kind of politically correct within yourself. But I also feel like this is the reason why we do need to decolonize the curriculum in itself, because I also kind of I'm very aware that many people are ignorant in this world. Many people aren't exposed to certain cultures and certain things. And that's why a lot of the time we need to decolonize what people learn. So within the education system, what students are kind of taking in and learning has to look like what people look like today. I don't know if that's making sense, guys, but what I'm basically trying to say is that the education system in itself needs to be kind of decolonized and changed to kind of reflect how people act today, what people look like today, and kind of to represent what people experience today. And by that, I feel like that's the only way that a lot of people can learn certain things and kind of understand certain things, because they're not exposed to it in their everyday life. Some people come from different walks of life and they're just exposed to their specific kind of, like, let's say they live in a specific area, it might not be as cosmopolitan or diverse, it might not be as multicultural, so they won't really understand certain things. So therefore I do believe that it has to change within, from the people higher up. They need to start making kind of take active steps to kind of find these young people that look different, that act different, that talk different, and start to kind of bridge that gap between the people that are in positions of power and young people that are passionate about these things, to make changes within the education system, the syllabuses and what we're learning about, to make changes from there so people can actually learn about it.
Yeah, thank you. So could we just to get into this a bit more deeply, Yumna, you said that like diversification is not enough, that we need decolonization. Can you explain what you mean by those two terms, just to make sure that we're clear about what you're talking about?
Yeah, so diversification is basically trying to diversify the syllabus or the literature that you're reading, try to get more, books from authors of color, whereas decolonization is far deeper. It's more of trying to change the mindsets and change the stereotypes that people have of certain communities. And it's trying to change the language that trying to change the language that we use, and focusing on the deeper things, like the deeper injustices that have been happening for a really long time, and trying to dismantle them and restructure the power and the privilege really within the school, but also that's been going, like, the restructure the power and the privilege that's in that exists in the world, basically.
I see. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. So I can see how it's a much deeper agenda than just like making the curriculum less sort of Eurocentric and like including more authors of color. You're saying that this is about changing the mindset and about educating people, not just to have more diversification in what you're reading about and what you're studying, but addressing. You're talking about social justice essentially, aren't you? And addressing like structural inequality. Is that correct?
Yeah. So talking about how we can develop critical consciousness basically within staff and also within students. And I feel like the education system doesn't actually accommodate for that either. So developing, critical thinking, and because it's essential if we want to develop young people who are articulate, who know about the issues that are going on in the world and actually be able to solve them. They need to have a deeper awareness of the social structures, the practices, the policies that result in all the different systems of oppression, of exclusion, of marginalization, in order to enact social justice. And the curriculum doesn't facilitate those sorts of conversations. It's more performative, it's not as active. And so we need to take a more multidisciplinary approach to learning, so that we are more equipped to basically tackle issues in a structural way, looking at things from a different angle. And that can only be achieved if you actually appreciate, where students own like identities come from. So yeah.
Yeah. So what did you said something a second ago? I didn't quite catch it. You said it's performative and not, did you say adaptive?
It's not as active.
It's not as active. I see. Right. Okay. So it's like a proactive thing that you're talking about. Yeah. Yeah. This is powerful stuff. And like, I mean, this is you know, obviously this is a conversation that society is having with itself at the moment, following the murder of George Floyd and BLM and you know, like decolonizing the curriculum. At the moment, I'm working with a group of schools in America who is a librarian actually, who was saying that like the Dewey Decimal System, the way that books are categorized in libraries is a really good example of how white privilege is sort of maintained and how a Eurocentric view of the world is maintained. And this librarian was looking at these books that they're giving to fourth grade kids, and it's just like these total like nonsense stories about Christopher Columbus and so on. And so they're going through a process of decolonizing the curriculum, but this is fiercely contested, isn't it? And they're playing quite a delicate political game, because there are people who strongly oppose that move. And so it's not like this is going to be an easy road to walk, is it? Like people feel very strongly on both sides. And it's one of those issues that generates a lot of heat. I don't know if you've encountered much of that. Have you come across much sort of resistance to this as you've been talking about this with people?
So for me personally, I feel like diversification of curriculum or of schooling is much easier to achieve, but it doesn't always result in a anti-racist educational space. It's decolonizing the education system is not going to take. It's literally it's a lifelong process, and it's an aspirational process that has to be part of the wider anti-racist work that's taking place. It can't just be one section of it. It has to take into account all the different aspects of the education system for it to actually be achieved.
So can you, like, before we came on air, you were talking about examples of this, about how social justice issues are not reflected, or how they're even sort of actively suppressed within the way that we educate young people. You were talking about examples of like young people speaking out about Palestine. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, of course. So like my main thing is, when I always talk to people, I always say that without understanding of how social inequities work together to create the unjust structures, understructures, education has been and will continue to be the site for production and reproduction of social injustices. And it can be applied to the recent example with what's been happening with Palestine. A lot of students and actually staff have been sending emails to their senior leaders and saying just showing signs of solidarity, whether that's a badge that they're wearing, whether they're trying to organize a protest in their school, whether they're handing out leaflets, or whether they're handing out flyers. Instead of schools and praising students basically and encouraging them for taking an active interest in issues that are going on in the world, and for actually being empathetic towards it and actually trying to make a change, they're actively preventing them from developing ourselves politically. And I feel like when you suppress that at a young age, these issues will still exist after I leave school. I'm not gonna wait until the future to make change, because when I leave school at 18, they're still gonna exist. Like, they don't disappear. So it's not a case of let's just suppress it in an educational setting. It actually affects students outside of the education system. When I leave school, I talk about these issues, but when I'm in school, it's much harder to. And that's why I feel like it's important to have teachers who try and go beyond the curriculum as much as they can, because I feel like it is hard, being in a normal mainstream public school. Can't expect teachers to go outside, like, talk about issues that are going on in the world if they can't. It's not within their it's not within the curriculum. It's not something they can do without thinking of the repercussions of that. And so Kate's having this school where she can children self-direct their learning. That's amazing. If I could self-direct my own learning, I would be teaching myself about financial education, political literacy, things that, that we aren't taught in schools, but there's things that we're going to come across basically in our lifetime. And political education is one of the biggest things. Me and Natalie were talking earlier, and she said, politics plays a big role in education, how we reimagine education. And she was talking about, in her time, how, Margaret Thatcher came in power, and how education reform was put in place, but education hasn't been as developed as it can be. And instead, when you think about it, not much has really changed since then. Apart from now, there's much more, people have much more agency, and they are actively thinking of actions that they can take place, rather than just being complacent and not really speaking out because of repercussions. And that's actually still happening now, but there's much more of awareness.
Wow. Yumna is honestly amazing, guys. It's actually scaring me, and she's only 16. That is crazy. Wow. I just wanted to also add, before it flies out of my head, that everything you said about kind of us not wanting to have a political stance as young people is a very real thing. When you go to school, they don't expect you to kind of have that wider, it's almost like when you go to school, they teach you kind of a specific syllabus and they teach you specific things, and they don't kind of want you to kind of develop your, obviously this is a big generalization and I'm not speaking as specific schools and stuff, but they kind of don't want you to have that political stance and to have your own political opinion. And even just in terms of what's been going on with Palestine and recent events, I feel like it's actually crazy to me that in primary school, at the age of 9 years old in year 4, we had an assembly on what was happening between Israel and Palestine. And kind of fast forward, and I'm a full-on adult now, and I'm an adult, and I was in year 13, and we are still speaking about the same thing, and nothing has changed. And just within that itself, obviously, it is a kind of a major issue that is going to take a lot of time to kind of fix and resolve. But just within schools and what we've been learning about, I've kind of realized why haven't we touched on this within school? Why haven't we learned about it and developed our knowledge on these issues? And even what has happened between Israel and Palestine, I used to do history, and it is as a result of what's kind of happened in history, and it all kind of links to history. So why aren't we kind of learning about this within our history lessons? Why isn't it embedded into our education? And yeah, it's also kind of just almost just pushed to the side when it's kind of it is really, really important, and it's what's happening right now. And just even in general, within schools, when I was in secondary school, speaking on issues such as Black Lives Matter, that affects me as a young Black individual, and things that were personal to me was always kind of feared, and we want to hush about it. But these are such important things that young people face. So why can't we find a way to kind of merge it into the curriculum? Certain things like financial literacy and everything that you were speaking about, Yumna, it was getting me riled up, because I'm just these are the things that we should be studying right now. Why is it such a taboo to implement this into our education system? And what we young people want to learn more about this. We want to understand each other more, and I think understanding is such a big thing. I'm diverting, but I live in East London, where everyone is different, everyone's diverse, and I've learned so many things from different people's cultures, and I've learned so much from, and I feel like it's honestly built me to become the person that I've become, purely based off of my experience and where I've been situated and where I've grown up environmentally. But other people that maybe come from completely different walks of life in completely different areas may not have this exposure, and I honestly find it it's quite sad that other people aren't exposed to certain issues and things that are so important to other individuals in the world, purely because of the education system, and how it's just it's almost blacklisted to specific kind of things like the Tudors and World War II. It's very specific, and it never changes, and it doesn't really alter. And I find that very strange. And I feel like every single child within the UK and every single child across the world should have the opportunity to kind of have some level of influence over what they are going to learn. Yeah.
It's really interesting that you say that, Sephora. I almost think, I'm not a historian, and I expect I will be upsetting some historians, but I always think that when you do the Tudors, it's sort of like a safe area somehow of history to look at, although it's not, because obviously there was a lot of exploration, and that's probably the root of a lot of stuff. But we look at the nice side of it, and we look at Henry VIII and his 6 wives, and what the Tudors ate and how they danced or whatever. it's all very safe exploration of history, rather than what was actually really going on at that time, and what were people doing, and what did that lead to. And I think, I mean, it's great just listening to both of you about, you know, decolonisation. It really is about that. It's really breaking everything apart. It's a very difficult, and it is a very difficult conversation that needs to be had, which has to be structured quite carefully. But it is important. It's kind of peeling back those layers of what we're used to actually trying to understand, well, but what does it mean to us individually from where we come from? I mean, when I think about Bristol, for example, and its identity as a city, and its history, I mean, it is really steeped in quite dark history, and that's as a Bristol, as someone, I don't live in Bristol, but I know people in Bristol who would love that story to actually just be honest and to be truthful about it and not ignored. And it is those kinds of conversations, like, well, it's about being honest, and it's about embracing what has happened in places and how that's impacted on people, no matter where it is in the world. But obviously that's massive, but we have to start having those conversations as to how you peel back that veneer that we have at the moment to get down to the nitty-gritty of decolonising the thinking that we have at the moment and getting to the root of what it means to be human and how we are connected. Sorry, I'm going to stop.
Oh, we love it. And it's so necessary. And even that got me thinking about, like, just me as like a previous historian, I don't do history anymore, taking on politics and that type of route. But just even like previously studying history and kind of the textbooks in the past, like everyone mentions this. Why were certain issues that happened in like the 1960s in black and white? Like, why are we during the civil rights and Martin Luther King's activism, why are we kind of shying away? Even the way the textbooks are like formed and shaped, why are they kind of making it seem like it happened 1,000 years ago and the ancient history, when what happened in those textbooks and what we see in the past happens in our present day? For example, even with kind of just touching on racial issues and what's kind of been, I think, what's in the current media right now, what happened to Stephen Lawrence back in the late 1980s, him being like racially attacked and kind of undergoing a violent murder, has now kind of transcended to today. And on the 1st of June, I think it was Dear Reed John, I'm not too sure what his name is, but I need to remember his name exactly, but had undergone the same thing had happened to him. And this is kind of what we read about so he was basically racially attacked and abused by 4 grown men in the ages of 30. They were all 30 years old, and I think a 14-year-old and a 13-year-old had kind of racially abused him and murdered him, so his life had gone. And that incident, we seem to think that things like that used to just happen in the past and it was just back in the day. This is happening right now, so what can we do to change that? Like, why do we act like it's just things that have happened ancient history when it's actually within our present day?
I wholeheartedly agree with that, because people just pretend as if it's the past. So I do history for GCSEs. I'm a Year 10 student, by the way. Like, you hear all these stories about these great heroes who overcame these obstacles, but then what are those obstacles? Are they still going on? Why did they not mention it? Why did they not choose to think about tackling it? It's just a piece of information in a textbook. That's literally how it's presented to our students. And it's like they're degrading the value of the mental trauma it could have had on the people. And it's really revolting, honestly.
Thank you. Yeah. Were you going to say something, Kath?
With all of this, it's extraordinary to hear your voices and to be recognizing that trauma that is still so, it's happening now. There's no ancient history about it, as you say. I feel incredibly privileged to be here and talking to you, and also to be able, I was just thinking, my son, I've just breastfed on a live stream, and I feel like as a woman, that feels incredibly liberating, and thank you for the safe place in order to do that. but yeah, baby steps. We're getting there. Well, I'm really aware of the time as well, and I just wanted to say, if you could dream, if you walk through a door in 2030, guys, and school had really shifted, like the walls had been broken down, maybe they got the bulldozers in, something else was there, what would that look like? I would really love to know if you've got any great insights into your dreaming, visioning brain as to what that could be. That would be amazing.
I feel like we should hear from the young ones, but I'm gonna make a start.
Go on then, Natalie.
That's okay. I think I came across there's a school in Paris. I think it's called 42, and it is for older young people, and it's like a hub, and it's tech. It's part of the new Silicon Valley, but in Paris. And basically they get people, all the young people that go there can choose their route as to what they can take, to develop themselves as people in their careers, in their interests, in the tech way. There's a school in London, School 21, which is taking that to almost the next level, and I think it starts taking kids from age of 13, and they that is more self-directed. They get involved in projects that they are interested in, and I kind of imagine that maybe school isn't a thing, that actually you have hubs in communities which young people can tap into depending on what their interests are in, and they can be in a class of with 60-year-olds in it, but they're all there because they're all interested in the same sort of subject, whether it's to do with the environment, whatever. But I imagine that there's, for me, and who am I to say, because I'm not young, but I just feel like the school as a place needs to change. The physical idea of school has to change, and it should be more hubby, more hivey, and there's much more freedom of thinking, of movement, of where you go, like almost like a library, but you've just got lots of libraries and you dip into them how you want to, and even online where you want to find information about what it is that's driving you and giving you purpose in your own life.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Natalie.
I'm just going to pause just for 1 second. I've realized that I've been live streaming this to my own page rather than to the Facebook group. So people, it's now streaming to the Facebook group. If anyone's watching, sorry about that. You catch the end of it, but I'll post the whole thing later on. This has been a real, I'm learning so much from this conversation, and I think that we really need to do a lot of listening in the first place, like I said at the start, just to hear people's different experiences and to see like what sort of an education system would you like to see. And I would, like you sort of answered one of the main questions that I had, which is that I suppose that like a devil's advocate position against, seeing education as this like social justice, like anti-racist, decolonizing project. You could say that like it's not the place of schools to politicize young people, or to see schools as instruments of social justice or of like social engineering, that these are places of learning, and that we sort of teach you about the world, and that takes the form usually of subject-based learning. And you could I think that people would probably argue that case, but I think that you've already sort of answered it when you were saying, Yumna, that if we provided even a small amount of space for self-directed learning within the curriculum, that young people would have the space to be supporting one another and to be learning about what it is that they see as important. And also, there are things like citizenship education, which was a thing a while ago. They brought it in, and like so many political fads, and it's a good example of a reform, Yumna, that doesn't actually lead to any meaningful change. The bringing in citizen education was a thing, and it was brilliant while it lasted, teaching young people about different, voting systems and about, democratic representation and engagement. And, that stuff is just so basic. Like, why is that not mandatory? But for whatever reason, I don't remember exactly how, citizenship education was just like quietly dropped and just swept away and just sort of forgotten about. And there's a tiny amount of government and politics stuff that we do in PSHE, but that's often not even taught as a subject in schools. Sometimes they do it through drop-down days, and again, it's just another way to sort of sideline that stuff. And so you can see how, I don't think that you need to reframe school as this like instrument of social engineering. You could just say, like, we could actually just create a little bit of space, teach young people about politics and education, and educate them about these ideas, and also provide a little bit of space in the curriculum for them to follow their own interests, and to share those interests and to communicate with one another.
I think sorry, I just jump in. I want to say that there's an argument, and it's quite persuasive online, that if you give young people space to choose what they want to learn, they will just choose to play Minecraft all day or choose to watch kittens on YouTube. And I think we've had a couple of these conversations now with youngsters, and what you are talking about wanting to learn, that you would choose to spend your own time on if given that time, is so enlightening. You would choose to better yourselves. You would choose to become broader in your thinking and more independent and able to meet your own needs. And all of the things that we want young people to be when they're 18, able to meet their own needs, able to look at the world and think and engage with it critically and make their own choices. And you're saying that you're not getting that from the education system. And if you were given a little bit of space, that's what you would fill it with. I just think that's such a powerful argument for giving over more time to young people and having you talk to one another about what you're passionate about and the differences that you want to make in the world, not waiting for the grown-ups to give you permission and just a 1 week project at the end of term where you can raise some money for a charity, but to actually live and breathe every day the difference that you want to see in the world. Yeah, I'm really hopeful after talking to you this morning. Oh, and I'm making a film that captures those voices, and I would love each of you to put something in. Would you do that? If I email you, will you be in my film?
100%.
Wow. Wow, that's so cool. I was gonna add that I feel like what you said about that little bit of space, kind of, that's all young people want. We just want that little bit of just that little bit of space to kind of be able to say what we would like to say. And I also think, just back to in general, how a lot of people are like, oh, we can't turn this kind of the devil's advocate argument that, we can't turn school into a social justice warrior, kind of politically correct kind of institution where everyone's kind of speaking on kind of their opinion. But I completely disagree with that, because if you're young enough within the education system to experience kind of young people as well, young people are ignorant to certain things, but to experience kind of racist abuse, to be from that kind of place of you're on the experiencing end. If you're young enough to experience it, then I think you're young enough to learn about it. If you're kind of on the opposite end and you're kind of experiencing these things and you're having to learn, let's say you are from Palestine and you're kind of from that background, and you're now kind of having to kind of take that on just at home, and it just to be like it's kept at the home and it can't go elsewhere. I think that's kind of crazy to me. I feel like, yeah, if you're young and you're experiencing it, we should also be young and learning about it. That's my argument.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, like I've got an eye on the time as well. It's 1 o'clock. I feel like we need longer because I feel like we're literally just getting started. I have so many questions that I would like to pursue. I think one thing I would really like to maybe let's end on like a practical note. So if there are any teachers or school leaders who are watching this, who are thinking, okay, yeah, I can see that we need to start doing things quite radically differently. This is not a tinkering at the edges thing. This is like a radical rethink of what this whole thing is all about, and making sure that young people are seeing themselves and seeing their own interests reflected in what they're learning about. What could you recommend, or what sort of steps would you say that teachers or school leaders can make, or what sorts of things have you seen happening out there in the world that you think actually that's moving in the right direction now? So I don't mind who goes first with that. Should I come to you first, Yumna? Have you got an answer to that one?
Yeah, I feel like teachers should just start by educating themselves. I feel like that's where everything starts. When you educate yourself, you read more books. When you're trying to think about ways that you can implement it in your own classroom, I feel like that's where, you know, change can really happen. And you can influence your students by that. Even if you're a maths teacher, implement, a bit of financial education in your classroom. If you're a science teacher, think about the ways in which, scientists all this time, we've been having a Eurocentric vision of science, when some of the things that have been discovered were discovered by Black scientists ages ago, but they were reinstated by white scientists. Teach your students about those sort of things, and just create a safe space where students can actually come to you and talk to you and have those positive discussions with you. And even though they may be difficult at first, if you're open, and as young people, we're open. I'm open to speaking to anybody at any time. If you want to create that safe space for students, go for it, do it, and you'll find that a lot of young people would come to you and engage in those conversations with you.
Yeah, I would also just say stop seeing kind of decolonizing the curriculum as such a radical thing, and stop seeing these changes as so indifferent and so far away to us now, because like we said before previously, Margaret Thatcher was able to kind of reform and make changes. So why can't amongst young people kind of, I know it seems a bit strange, and it's never been done before, but I feel like young people want that voice, want that platform, that kind of specific, I don't know what it would mean, whether it should mean like young people kind of getting together and kind of making that connection with people in power. I think that's quite important to me, because I know that as a young person, sometimes we do feel powerless. Young people do feel like they can't make any changes. They say stuff, it can only go to the school council, and it kind of just stops there. Like, really and truly, it doesn't really make that wide scale changes. So in terms of the grand kind of wide scale changes, I think making that connection with, and by people in power, I just keep saying people in power, I mean specific people, people that kind of are specifically have that role within within education, people that are making decisions based on education, having connections with them, and then making the changes from there.
Yeah, thank you. Zoya, have you got any thoughts on this final question about like practical things that teachers and schools can do?
I'd like it if our school gave us that the sort of understanding, because how should I put this? So I've had this interest built in me since years, but I've had no information given about it. I've had no sort of, what do you say, a road, a guidance for me to work on my interests. So I feel like what the school could do is, rather than just saying, focus on your work hard, get good grades, I'd rather our school gave us that slight support. That's not just school. So, because like I'm interested in politics, so I'd rather that the school gave me some advice, maybe some not counseling, but the link, the connection. The school should be providing each of us with that connection, rather than just like dismissing our thinking so suddenly.
Yeah,
I haven't phrased it right, I guess, but it's just because I feel as though that although I'm being encouraged a lot, I'm not being given that right support a lot. So that I don't know where to go. I'm still like oblivious as to what decisions I need to make and why I think should be good for my future.
Yeah, thank you, Zoya. No, you phrased it perfectly. And so is this something that you talk about with your friends at school, that you wish that there was a space for you to sort of explore these ideas, but that's just not really?
I wrote multiple letters on it, to be fair, and even I discussed it with youth councils, many councils, but again, it's not something that can be implemented so quickly.
Right. And so what is it specifically that you would like to see?
Because, okay, for me, this is my personal experience, so I'm not really speaking on behalf of anyone, but like I mentioned before, I'm interested in politics, but how am I supposed to get into politics? Because you can't just tell me that I need to have good grades. Like, sure, you do need to have good grades, but will that really guarantee your future, your voice? Is it really guaranteeing anything? So what I want is sort of like, because I'm in year 10 and I have no clue what to do. Like, yes, there's university, yes, there's college and everything. So what are the steps I need to take to have a good future? What are the steps I need to take to make my own future, to create a better society?
I see. So it sounds like you're sort of describing a sense of detachment. Like you feel like the school experience that you're having is detached from the future that you want to be a part of, and you
Yes,
can't really
because
see how this leads to that. Is that correct?
yes, because I feel like that you cannot tell me that from English literature and English language that I'm gonna suddenly become a world like high class public speaker now, can I?
This is something that we've noticed over the years, James and I. There's a particular style of education where children get to play at running the country. So from a young age, they are practicing and playing at running the country. They learn how to use the words, they learn how to use the mannerisms, they practice over and over again. If I ruled the world, how would I do it? How would I win the argument? And that's how children learn. They learn through playing again and again and again and trying different things and honing their skills and the language that they use until it becomes embodied, until they feel like they can run the world. And only a certain amount of young children in the UK get to do that in any kind of formalized way.
Yep.
Some children grow up and they're fortunate enough to have a family and they sit around the dinner table and their parents do that for them. And they genuinely ask them what their opinion is and they play that game. But there's no space for that in schools.
No.
So when you get to 16, when you get to Zoya's age and you want to do that, you have a voice, you want to try and affect change, you want to try and make a difference. There's nowhere to go and play. There's nowhere to practice doing that. Where do you get the opportunity to make a difference? And that needs to, I think that we need to open up a space for that right from the beginning. If we want the world to change, who do we think is going to change it? Some invisible person in the stratosphere? It's not, it's us. We are the people who change our own lives. But if we don't get to practice making things be different, how do we develop the skills and the network of people to make those changes with? We've all met each other. We're in our 40s. We've finally met a group of other people who want to make the same kind of changes. And now we're moving like a train in a direction. But it's taken us all this time to find it. Now with the modern technology is making it easier for youngsters your age to connect. You've got Pupil Power now, but you still need forums to go and play at making a change. And that needs to be structural. Local councils need to make space for young people to start trying to make a difference, to start trying to fix issues in their towns. Schools need to have school councils that are genuine. What can you genuinely get hold of and be allowed to try and fix as a team of young people so that you develop those skills? That takes work away from us, the adults. If the youngsters are in charge of the school menu, if you are in charge of how the morning routine works, whatever it is, what part of your school day, if you can begin to take control of it and make decisions so that it meets your needs, that's less for us to do as institutions. So it makes perfect sense to me, at least, to begin that process. That's what I would like to see more of. I would like to see more of the power given over to the young people to make the decisions that impact on them. Sorry,
I
that was
100% that is literally. I am a member of school council, and if I'm being completely honest with you, I have done zero work. It's literally, it's all in the name. It's just a title you've got, like in your school.
Yeah.
Within school, there's nothing for me to do within school. I'm not being given any roles or duties to fulfill. So I'm just here lounging around and trying to create my own opportunities to other organizations, which and clearly due to the COVID, I can't do much either. So it's
Yeah.
it's ridiculous, honestly. And I think we need to have that play, like you were talking about. I think our school should definitely implement that. But will they really trust us? And this may be out of place to say, but it's really, even the school structures are quite discriminatory, because you're only going to be able to be part of that play if you're a good student, most likely. If there's a group of students that the school can vouch for, they can bet on them. But what about the other students? They may be just as passionate, but just because they're lacking, they're not. Okay, that sounds rude when I say lacking, but I'm sure you understand.
Yeah, of course.
But like, if they're lacking, they won't get the opportunities. But that's not fair on them, because they've got the motivation, which can sometimes be even more powerful than the talent one holds. So you're literally just undermining a person, and rather you're just betting on that free students out of the hundreds. So
Absolutely. You don't see many like boys who are on the brink of exclusion on school councils. And it's their voices that, we need to be listening to the most, you could argue, not some like high achieving person who's just going to add it to their CV.
if you're the parent of a young man who's on the brink of exclusion or has got a lot to say but nowhere to say it, you could send them our way. We would like to hear from them.
Yeah, I mean, to go back to what Kate was talking about earlier, so at Eton College, which, as you know, is where so many of our like politicians come from. Boris Johnson was there, David Cameron, Osborne, like just loads and loads of them. And at Eton, they do take this stuff really seriously. They recently built a debating chamber. It cost them £18 million. Like, you could build a whole school for that. And they spent that much just on a debating chamber. It's called Jafar Hall. And it looks like the Houses of Parliament. It's sort of got like rows and rows of wooden benches facing each other. And they, like Kate says, they're role playing for when they get to run the country. And that's a good thing in a way, like it's a good idea that one should practice these things. But that game should be being played in every school on the planet, shouldn't it? Because we're only drawing from a very small pool of people, and therefore a very small pool of talent. And you don't have to look at our current crop of politicians to see that we could do with accessing a wider talent pool, because there are some hopelessly inadequate people running things at the moment because they're well connected and they went to these schools and those schools open doors and so on. And so we do need to be playing this game in every school on the planet. But one thing, like, that's a hard thing to achieve, right? Because you therefore have to persuade all these teachers and head teachers to carve out physical space, time in the curriculum, to make this work, to skill up their teachers in how to run debates and so on. And that's all really hard to do. But what's amazing that's sort of happening at the moment, and Pupil Power is a really good example of this, is that you don't need all that stuff in order for people to come together and rehearse those skills and to practice, public speaking, as you're all doing so brilliantly in this call today. And one thing that I'm really interested in doing with Rethinking Education, not that I've got any time to explore another thing, but I really want to do something that's even wider than these campfire conversations. Maybe it's some sort of online conference, series of online conferences where we're bringing together lots and lots and lots of people's voices, young people who are on the brink of exclusion, very young kids. So like, we had 9-year-old Locks on the call last week, and he was so articulate and confident. And like often people just like they think of we maybe need to talk to some bright year 11s, right? But we can be involving young people right the way throughout the age range, and listening to them and involving them in decision making. And I'm really interested to pursue this and to see if we can get some sort of a wider movement happening outside of the school system, because 5 years ago this would have been not possible, would it? Like the internet connection wasn't stable enough to be able to have a conversation like this, let alone across the Atlantic Ocean. And here we are, and we've got the technology at our fingertips, and we can come together and organize and share one another's stories and voices. And all I want to do really is to do that, to create that space where that happens, and then just see what emerges from these conversations. And the best ideas will rise to the top, and then we'll have some idea about how we can do things differently. Anyway, I think we should probably stop talking at some point soon. Thank you very much. Let's have a little round robin, and we'll just see if anyone's got any final words to say before we wrap this up. Let's start with Sephora.
Yeah, this was honestly amazing to just be a part of. I think everything that we discussed is so important to me, like personally as well. Just purely being someone that's been through the education system and that's seen so much wrong with it, but also that there's been a lot of good things that we can't forget. Yeah, also just quickly just to touch on briefly what I think Zoya mentioned as she was ending and rounding up the conversation, was that idea that, this even within student council within itself, they pick the brightest students and the best students and the most polished students. I think real education and real I think we need to hear real stories, and we need to hear real personal stories in order to understand what we need to do and what steps we need to take. I think conversations like this are so important. And when you hear things that students themselves have been through, it's just so great to hear and so important that we can express that and have a platform to articulate that. Because a lot of people, they go through stuff, and because they don't have because they're deemed as, they're troublesome or they misbehave, they don't they're not able to equip the right words, and they're not able to articulate how they feel and express that. And to even hear that Kate has a platform or a place where students that are on the brink of exclusion can come and confide in her, and hopefully there's other steps that you can take. That's amazing to hear, because even seeing me personally as well, just quickly briefly touching on this, was just seeing students around me that have been excluded, and sometimes they don't really deserve it. But yeah, just having places and communities like this is overall just so amazing. It's been amazing speaking to you guys and just getting to know about and hearing about all the amazing things that you guys are doing. So privileged, and I feel so blessed to be here, guys. So thank you for just allowing me to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. So last words, Natalie.
Yeah, last words. Yeah, just great. Again, a great privilege. Wonderful to hear young people speaking so brilliantly and eloquently about their experiences and about their visions. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Kate.
Just want to say that it feels very hopeful that if we give more space for more young people to use their voices, we will learn and things will change. So let's hope more of that happens.
It definitely seems like the vehicle for change, doesn't it? It's not rocket science. Bring people together, see what they have to say. Thank you. Zoya.
So it's been an honor to be here. Each of your voices was absolutely amazing, and to be honest, these are all the issues that we face every day, but they're never addressed to. So the fact that there's a platform where we can address such things and I can be a part of it, it's a true honor, and I'm grateful for everyone to be able to hear my voice. Thank you.
Thank you. That's great. Kath.
Oh, there's so much richness in everything you guys said. Sephora, I loved the really learning about the things you're experiencing as you're a young person growing up. I think that's absolutely critical. And then Yumna, making that space and trusting young people as well. It's again another great takeaway from this conversation. And then Zoya, the roadmap for following your interests, I think is also crucial. So thank you so much, all of you. I mean, there's so much more in there as well, but it's been a privilege to be here. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And Yumna.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this call. I'm really blessed to, share my own experiences and talk to other young people, other adults who are, sharing their own. I want to give a quick shout out to this book. It's called From What Is to What If by Rob Hopkins. And a lot of what I've heard about the education system, I've learned in that. There's a chapter in the book, I told Natalie about it, and it's about, I think it's called What If School Nurtured Young Imaginations. It's a really amazing chapter. I would really recommend you read it. And it's given me so much more insight into the education system. And if we, envision how our future education system could look like, that would be it for me. Also, I'm launching a youth-led organization soon called Resilience, which is dedicated to the personal and professional development of young people, so that we can organize and grow our collective resilience to, solve societal global issues. And so if anyone, wants to talk to me more about that or anything, I'd be more than up for it. But thank you so much for inviting me on this call. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Well, send us links and we will spread them as far and wide as we possibly can. It has been an absolute joy to spend some time with you. I do hope that you will join us again in the future. And thank you for recommending that book. I literally listened to it like in the last 2 weeks on Audible. And as soon as I finished, I went back and listened to that chapter again that you mentioned, which is absolutely awesome. So thank you for that. All right. Thank you, everyone. We will continue this conversation. This is just the beginning.